Welcome to Tone Talks. Welcome to Tone Talks.
What up, y'all? This is Antonio coming to you from Tone Talks yet again. I'm glad to have you here this Friday. We about to have a discussion. What up? I see y'all in there. Yeah. So Yvette was on the show. I appreciate her tuning in. And I appreciate everybody taking a Friday to hear this fire, because it's about to be lit up in here. The topic today, and Yvette knows what it is, from Diddy to Boyce Watkins to Powernomics, what keeps us from seeing the racial wealth gap? You know, this ties into the big report that we released this week that talked about the myths, everything that was basically misinterpreted as a reason we have this wealth gap. The key reason is we black. The key reason is slavery and Jim Crow. Yvette, you want to say hi to the audience?
What's going on, Breaking Brown family? Happy Friday. Hope you're ready to enjoy your weekend.
Shout out to everybody in the chat. I know you guys was looking forward to Sandy. Sandy had something come up, and I really thought we needed to do this first. We needed to frame this thing, and next week we'll go over all 10 myths with Sandy Darity. But this week, you won't be left without full satisfaction as we have a discussion about what keeps us from seeing the racial wealth gap. You know, I look at this thing, and we're going to go through the decadent veil again. We're going to go through financial literacy. We're going to go through the whole reality of black buying power. You know, Yvette, did you get a chance to check the report out?
I read the whole thing.
I'm so glad that you did. Oh man, I let me say this. I got some of the best support out here on the net, as do you, and I appreciate that these people support us, that they let us into their homes and into their minds as we start to flesh this thing out together. Oh, let's have this. Shout out to Craig Bardo. He just dropped $250 on me. I appreciate that. That's going to be used to market this thing and to push this whole project forward, because this is the moment that we've been waiting for. And let me say one thing before I get started. The Angela Project, me and Yvette are heads of that. Shout out to Pastor Cosby. Shout out to the Progressive Baptist, the Cooperative Baptist, the National Baptist. We're going to be in Philly in August with Sandy Darity. We're going to be having this discussion. Look out for the flyers. It's going to be coming. But before we get to Philly, let's start right here today at Dash Radio. Press the Dash Talk app. You can call in at 1-323-879-4445 and also tune in at Tone Talks YouTube. So, Yvette, we're going to be talking about, again, the decadent veil. This has now been framed inside of an academic paper. I appreciate Sandy Darity and Dark Hamilton for allowing me to do that. You know, what I feel is happening is we can't really understand everything because everybody doesn't know they black. Let me explain. When you read this paper, if you did it make you feel frustrated because you didn't know what's in this paper? Because this paper did nothing more than explain the consequence of blackness. And I think for a lot of people, it was shocking. And that is a quite an interesting reality for black people in this country, because I don't think it would have been shocking for a black person in Jim Crow. I don't think it would have been shocking for a black person fresh out of slavery. But a black person post-Cosby really didn't truly maybe understand the consequence of blackness before this paper. Yvette, you want to give your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think part of what happened, and I give people a little leeway who came around way back when, sometimes, because I understand that the data was not available, right? But now that it is available, like, you have to adjust yourself. And see, what we have to hold people responsible to now is adhering and anchoring what they say in data, right? We have too much not to do it. So yeah.
Oh man, Yvette, I appreciate you when you bring the heat. Sometimes I have to get out the kitchen, and that's saying a lot. You know, we got a caller. Let me take the first caller of the night, and then we're gonna get into this decadent veil. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Sarah. I'm calling from Sacramento.
Hey, Sarah, how are you doing today? Well, did you have a
I'm
piece
well.
on the report? Did you get a chance to read it?
I haven't read it yet, but I'm so grateful that so many people in the feed are posting it and sharing it. My comment was that I lived in the UK for some time, and they don't have a decadent veil there. And the reason why is that class is very strict over there. And what I noticed is that over here, we get a lot of trinkets. We get iPhones and we get MacBooks and we get to go to dinner wherever we want, even if we don't have the funds. And I think because our super capital overlords give us so many trinkets to distract us, we don't realize how bad off we really are. And when they put someone like Beyonce in front of us or Black Panther in front of us, which, by the way, I'm completely appalled by how many people are reposting that Black Panther has beat Titanic, it's gotten over $1 billion, and it's like, you just gave all that money to Disney.
Let me start framing this, caller. I appreciate you speaking your piece. Thank you so much. We're gonna get to you offline. But what I want to do now, Yvette, you there? I want to start framing what the caller was just telling me, because she said some powerful stuff. Let's start off because we always presume everybody knows the numbers. The numbers are on page 1 of this report. We made sure it was right there as soon as you open it. Let me share a little bit. The typical Black family in the lowest quintile of income earners has basically a 0 or a negative net worth. The typical white family in that same quintile has about $18,000 in worth. At the other end of America's economic spectrum, Black households constitute less than 2% of those in the top 1% of the nation's wealth distribution. The 99th percentile Black family is worth a mere $1.5 million, while the 99th percentile white family is worth over $12 million. This means over 870,000 white families have a net worth above $12 million, while out of the 20 million Black families in America, fewer than 380,000 are even worth $1 million. By comparison, over 13 million of the total 85 million white families are millionaires or better. This is the framework that we have to understand to start the discussion. That Black folks have created an idea of the Black millionaire like they aren't unicorns, and even more rare than a unicorn. Understand that of those 380,000 families, most of them are 1.1, 1.2. That's older boomers with their house and their pension. I just said there's 870,000 white families at 12 million and up. That means that they're controlling industry. They're hiring folks. You can be a $1.1 million millionaire and basically be 2 factory workers that bought a house in the right area. Understand that's the best of Black America. That's just the data. Now the question becomes, how do we deal with it? So I look at this thing and I'm framing why we can't see it. And I think the first thing we have to deal with is the decadent veil. I've used that before. I wanted to share a section. The decadent veil looks at Black America through a lens of group theory and seeks to explain an illusion that has taken form over a 30-year span of financial deregulation and newfound access to unsecured credit. This veil is trimmed with million-dollar sports contracts, Rock Nation tour deals, and designer labels made for heads of state. How can we see ourselves when our channels are filled from ESPN to VH1 with Black millionaires? Bet, what do you think?
Well, the problem is we don't see ourselves. See what you and I do. What we need to explain to people is like the reason that you don't really like to see Antonio and Yvette is because we're a mirror of what Black life really looks like. And I don't want to put it like this, but like sometimes other people don't like mirrors, right? Because we're not ugly because of anything that we are. We've been made this way. So you like been in a coal mine or something, working as a slave. People have been mistreating you, not paying you, and that has a consequence on you. So you don't want to look at that mirror. You want to see a presentation of you that you believe that's you, but it's really not you. It's really social engineering. And so instead of saying, listen, you kind of broke my body, and now you've made this ugly thing out of it. You have to fix me because I'm not whole. I'm like a monster here now. You have to fix me. We're like, no, I'm beautiful. Don't you see Will Smith? Don't you see they have a beautiful, don't you see Diddy?
Oh, we're going to get to Diddy and Black excellence right now. Hashtag Black excellence. I've never seen hashtag white excellence. The reality of expecting excellence from Black folks that are suffering in ghettos created by the color of law is borderline insane. I really think that we don't understand that we're setting the bar so high for ourselves that we can't achieve it, and then as a result can't achieve the basic tenets of American life. And I look at Diddy, and it's funny because the day after the report came out, or the day of, actually maybe that afternoon, he dropped this image of why there aren't Black executives. Understand that in the celebrity section, we specifically dealt with Black executives. So I have to wonder whether you read it already. The context of him asking that question shows that there's a misunderstanding and a disconnect in his understanding of race in this country. Understand the reason why there aren't executives is because the reality is there aren't black wealthy people. See, we don't understand, like Thomas Piketty pointed out about super managers. It's in the report. You can check it out, celebrity section, myth 9, and we'll go through some of those myths. What we find is that those are professions reserved for white people, hiring each other. That's the dynamic going on at that elite level. And I think that what we do is we create a mythology around empire and Puff Daddy and everything else that isn't real. And if we can't get real, we can't get nowhere real for our family, for our future. You want to say something, Yvette?
Well, no, I don't think. I think you're right in terms of we can't progress if we don't understand what's real. But see, when people say, part of the problem too is I've had people tell me, well, the data isn't everything, Yvette. Well, no, I'm not saying that your anecdotal life and your personal life doesn't matter. I'm not telling you that. But data is whole groups of people. So when you want to understand where a group is headed or how a group is doing or how a group is surviving or thriving, you have to look at that. It's the movement of groups, and our data is abysmal. So it really is everything if you're talking about the condition of a group. We have to understand that.
Hashtag Black Excellence. I'm just saying, shout out to Killmonger and the Vanguard for supporting the channel. Thank you. I see your super chat, and I definitely will make good use of it to try to push this forward. What I'm seeing is, like, I look over at Will Smith. Let's move the wheel a little bit. And I see much of the same thing. We have a quote from Will Smith in the document where after Obama's elected, he basically said something to the effect that we were post-racial. Understand that Will Smith sold us a show where he was from a single parent household in the ghetto of Philly, when he actually was born to two stoutly middle class people, one owning a business in the 70s, engineering refrigerators, that being his daddy. His daddy wasn't gone like we saw on the episode on Fresh Prince, but then telling us that you can make it with anything. I mean, think about how atrocious that is. My thing to us is that the idea of overcoming all odds by somebody who didn't overcome all odds is a problem. Part of the reason that we can't see this gap is because people have hid it away, have taken their little advantage and made it seem like they didn't have an advantage. I mean, if we look at three groups, I live here in Los Angeles, I went to UCLA, and if I look at three groups, they dominated the admission to UCLA. Boomer hooked African Americans that are about my age, meaning you got a boomer and they basically were a professional due to affirmative action programs. Don't get me wrong, they worked hard, but they're very unique and they own a piece of property. Boomer hooked African Americans, new Africans who are from professionals, Cameroonians, Nigerians, and the third is somebody who has a white parent. Those three groups are not normal across the spectrum of African American life across this country, but they're overrepresented in the top group. And what we get as a result is this narrative from them that anybody can do anything if you just try hard. But that's not how you became successful. Your success was predicated on a specific advantage, and you have not acknowledged that yet. And I think that's part of what we're seeing with this veil, this cover. And if we don't lift the cover, we can't get no politics done, not only because white America can't see us, not only because government can't see us, but because we can't see ourselves. You know what I'm saying?
Well, the first step to seeing ourselves too. When you talk about Will Smith, he just said, well, you can put me on the treadmill, you can put somebody else on the treadmill. I remember this interview, and he said the difference between me and the other person is that you can't outwork me. And he's brought this down to a level of individual labor, right? And the problem is that we're in an era where individual labor doesn't matter. Labor doesn't have value. That's why they're not paying us no more. That's why you see all these corporations, they can pay people pennies. We're going to a third world America. So you have people having these discussions that don't really understand what it means to be us. But the second part, there's like another part of this, though, when we talk about not wanting to. See, the problem is, I think, when I listen to people, we're kind of ashamed. That's why we're so desperate for a solution. Like, if just give me a solution. Like, because I'm ashamed of what you're showing me about our community and how we look. But I think the first thing we have to understand is that, like, we don't have anything to be ashamed of. Like, we didn't do this to ourselves. We didn't attempt suicide and just blow half of our head off, and now we're walking around like, man, that was really messed up. No, something was done to us that I can't even say undervalued, that totally devalued us and was used to commoditize and enrich other people. That was not a voluntary thing. That is not an act of volition. That is an act of oppression. And so I think that we have to eat that and chew that up and digest it. We be trying to swallow stuff whole. It don't work.
I want everybody to go Google this article. It just came out maybe a week ago, I believe. Yvette posted on her Facebook. The corporate plan to groom U.S. kids for servitude by wiping out public schools. I saw a commercial for the first time this week that basically they trying to make it real sexy, but you can do public school at home. You just sign up, you can do it at home. And this article frames that there was a movement post Citizens United, which is the big case that allowed a bunch of corporate money to go to politics. What you see is that there's a movement to make your kids see themselves differently, to make your kids not have any potential. You can read the article and get your own view on it. But again, I might just put it up as an image. I'll decide later. But this is something that's going on that's big in the decadent veil, the veil of celebrity and the $1 million black person that really doesn't really exist in any kind of number is a problem for us. This is a big reason that we can't see the wealth gap. 323-879-4445. Call in, join the discussion. The point of the call-in shows for both me and Yvette is to give you guys a chance to voice your opinions on this as well as ours. But we're going to rock the boat. We're going to make sure that everybody's held accountable. Now, don't get me wrong. If we see some growth, we definitely going to try to throw our hands out there and support, whether it be Diddy or Claud or Boyce. This is not about being adversarial. But it is about holding people's feet to the fire and getting the narrative right, so the narrative can actually lead to politics that leads to a better course of life for black folks and for poor folks as a whole. Now, let's get to this other section. The other big cover that I wanted to kind of hit was this financial literacy element, this business element. These were two different myths in the actual report. Financial literacy and buying and banking black. Myth 3 was buying and banking black. Let's take this next caller. Myth 5 was financial literacy. Myth 4 was savings. I'm going to get into all of them next week with Darity. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
This is Dale from Upper Marlboro, Maryland.
Hey, Dale, let me just tell these people. Next week, Sandy Darity will be here on the channel. He'll be discussing all 10 myths. What I wanted to do this week was to frame it out. This is a part 2 of a 3-part series. For all those people that were here last week, we talked The Cosby Show and Angela Rich. Now I want to talk about the culture around the wealth gap that doesn't allow us or white folks to see it. But next week, we're going to talk the myths themselves and get the man himself in here, the man, the legend, Sandy Darity, one of the leading economists in the nation on this topic. I'm blessed to have worked with him, and I appreciate he gave me the chance to make a lot of the points that I've been making nationally on an academic stage. Dale, what's your take on this?
Basically, like I said, we living in a fantasy. I don't know if you and Yvette saw what Johnson was on with Roland Martin, and he was saying that blacks have done well under Trump's.
Oh yeah, that was Dark Hamilton answered that on the Washington Post. You can check that out. Just Google Dark Hamilton, Washington Post, and Johnson. It doesn't make sense. First of all, Trump's not been in office long enough, and second of all, every policy that he's passed has been basically outside. I think a little bit for the HBCUs has not been helpful for black folks. Food boxes and tax cuts.
Right.
It's awful. We don't even know what Trump's policies are going to look like. I just tell you right now, that tax cut is going to really be devastating for black folks in my mind.
Right. Well, because we're poor and it's bad for poor people, and the majority of us are poor, so that's why it hits us worse than everybody else.
Yeah, we rely on programs and government. Go ahead.
Right. Like during the Yvette show on Wednesday, and probably during your show, you have people in the chat talking about we need to separate and we need to build our own communities. First of all, separating white people tried.
Yeah, we gonna get there.
Some years ago with the Civil War, that didn't work out for them. And secondly, they say, well, we've had Black Wall Street back in the day. Why can't we do it now? I don't think people understand how things were different back then.
Yeah. You're right.
And also, what happened to it when the white people saw they were flourishing more than them?
Let's add one more. Let's add one more step to what you just said. I don't think people know they black. See, like the reality of what I just told you is like we really don't even have like wealth like that. Look, look. Let me share one little section. I always got to come back to it, but I'm actually going to read it this time. I did an article. I like to know what I'm talking about. What I noticed, and I'm going to say it bluntly, from both Boyce Watkins and Claud Anderson, is that they tend to just say numbers without support. The problem with that is that without support, you can't do the first step of Powernomics and get factories. They don't need factories today. They do the build most of a lot of these companies. They do all their factory work in Mexico or in China, and Claude is telling us to build factories here.
Right.
Understand that this is the problem, and you can go Google this article. Who owns the land? In their research, the USDA Economic Research Service stated of all private U.S. agricultural land, whites account for 96% of the owners, 97% of the value, and 98% of the acres. Blacks possess 7.8 million acres of overall rural land. Forbes states Ted Turner, founder of CNN, alone owns 2 million acres of land. This total is nearly a quarter of what all black Americans combined own in rural land in the U.S. And it appears Turner also owns nearly half of what all blacks own in actual farmable land. Yvette, give me your take on that. Come on, man. How we gonna do it?
But I have to go back to what the caller was saying initially about before I get to what that says about what the land says about our economics. Now, I hear people talk to me about black capitalism as if they have a new idea, and I don't think people understand. Blacks have always tried capitalism, but it doesn't work if your government is weaponized against you, or if your government has decided that you're going to be the bottom and is not going to use its power on your behalf. There is no, when you talk about all the money that Elon Musk got, when you talk about how Uber was allowed to just tear apart all of this labor law, when you talk about all of that, you see government always takes a side. This idea that we don't need government always takes a side. It just doesn't take our side.
Yvette, let me let this caller loose, and then I'm gonna let another caller in here. I want to give everybody a chance to say their piece. Can we take this next caller, and then I'm gonna let you finish your point, Yvette. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from? You have to take the background down.
Hey, Antonio. This is my name is Jimmy Prezuma. I'm calling from Miami, Florida.
Let me let Yvette finish making her point. I wanted to get you in here, and Yvette, can you finish that point you were making? I apologize.
No, what I was going to say is that the government is never a neutral actor. We have this idea that ain't nobody using government. The government is never a neutral actor, right? And so and so what we've seen throughout our generations on these shores is government acting to leave us alone with white racists, or to act intentionally against us, as with the FHA. You cannot do black capitalism in that kind of toxic environment. It is toxic to any kind of business you would try to do, and you already missed the moment. That's when America was inclining. When America was growing, that's when everybody was doing business. Now they're overdoing business in other countries where it's already growing, and people like Jeff Bezos have perfected business to a certain amount that there is no entry. Nobody stopped these monopolies from getting big. There is no entry into this now. They cut off all the barriers to entry. These people are gangsters.
You know what I might do right here before I let you speak, caller? I might cut in an image on the actual YouTube version and show you guys that we have the greatest wealth calcification since the Gilded Age, which was the Depression. Everything that Claude and Boyce and the do-for-self bootstrappers are talking about was when America gave a lot more wealth to the bottom. The bottom 90% had a share of wealth that was like 35 and 36% in 1980. This is at the prime of many of these people's lives. And the bottom and the top 0.1 had 7 or 8% of the wealth. We're at a point where both groups have the same again. I might pull that up so you guys can see it. That hasn't happened since the Gilded Age. You can't give us policy or programs or solutions from the best time for the middle class today. Caller, what's your take on this?
Hey, Antonio. So I'm calling. I called into Yvette's show a long time ago. They call me the Young Doc. So what happened is,
I remember the young guy.
I recently graduated from medical school with $300,000 in debt when we were telling how much debt we had.
Yeah.
And so,
say that again. How much?
$300,000 in debt. Three good
That
loans.
almost gave me a stroke.
So what I found out is that as I was about to graduate medical school, I started feeling very frustrated, very down, because you kind of trapped when you get to medical school and you see how much debt. The only way you have an opportunity to pay it is if you actually finish it. So it's kind of like a story that they give you that once you get into school, you'll get a good job, but then you're kind of trapped because you won't even make any real money even after you graduate, after you go through training, because it takes so many years to pay back the debt. The $300,000, I literally have to live like I'm living right now, making about $45,000 in training for another 3 to 4 years after training, so I can give about 60% of my debt just to pay off the entire debt. Just to give up 60% of my earnings just to pay off my entire debt. But it's a rat race kind of, because you have to live a certain way to try to get some type of success. And
Caller, can I chime in? When I was working for the government, I'll tell you this: everybody not living on that 45. If your mama can pay your car note, if your mama and your daddy can pay your rent, if they can give you half on your down payment, if you don't have to give money to your little sister because she need a refrigerator in her house, your life looks a lot different. See, what we don't understand is that these elite professions on the white side are reserved for a class of white people that have wealth to support their children in mass. So what happens is our lens is very limited in exposure to the amount of wealth and what that means in terms of support, in terms of access. And then also these professions don't turn out the same for us. We end up working at Kaiser instead of having our own practice. Let me say that again. We end up working at Kaiser instead of having our own practice with our same friends that we golf with. I think that what's happening right now is that we're not really being honest in this country about what it means to be black. Part of the reason that I really enjoyed this project, because it's not just about myths, it's about exposing blackness, bringing it to a table why this young man has $300,000 in debt just to become a physician. Do you know how many black male physicians, let alone DOS, that are in this country that graduated this year?
There's a huge shortage, actually.
Come on, baby. Let me say this. Congratulations to you, brother. Shout out to you. I want to make sure everybody on this channel understands how rare that is, what you fought through, what you came through. And we here at Tone Talks and Breaking Bound to support you. Is there anything else you want to say to the audience?
So all I'm saying is when people see doctor and they assume rich, but they don't know black doctors. You don't even get paid as much as the white counterparts. So, you do what you can, but it's too much of a uphill battle. Sometimes you just gotta deal with the ducks you're given.
All right, thank you so much. Let's take this next caller. It's lit lines today. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Antonio?
Yes, yeah. It sounds like you got a little echo. Is there a way to go somewhere where it's not? Let me frame this up. When we talk financial literacy, we're talking about this whole idea that we need to be literate of finance to escape our condition. We answered this in the myths. We talked about financial literacy in myth 5. And what we said is the key point is this is directly from the report. You can go pick that report up for free. We're not charging for it. We want to disseminate that. It's everywhere on the internet. Google my name and wealth report. It'll come right up if it's hard to find. The key point is whites generally have more resources to invest at the outset. Not only do they invest more in home ownership, they invest more in financial assets too. Basically, whites have more of every asset simply because they have more resources. Hamilton and Darity, 2017. So, caller, let me know what you think about this.
Financial literacy, listen, it's obviously good to know how to manage your own money, but that's not going to, as you and Yvette say all the time, it's not going to outdo 400 years of terror on Native black people. I work at at a luxury condo in Philadelphia, and I can't wait to see you guys in August. But I work at a luxury condo in Philly, and there's a couple in here who was gifted a $3 million condo.
Oh, I saw your comment. I think you left that on my page.
Yeah. Financial literacy is not gonna
close that gap.
Compete with that.
And let me say this, caller. Also, what happens is as you join into the elite professions, because I saw much the same while I went to law school, when I became a professional. We just don't have exposure till we get to the dance. When you get to the dance and you look around and you realize, hold up, people been dancing for years, and I don't even got no shoes on. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, what I start to see is that we look for these answers. Let me say this about Claude, and I think Yvette will join in with this. Claude gets it right about the problem. You know, it isn't bad choices. I think Claude gets that exactly right in his Powernomics book, but rather it's about systemic oppression. It's about us being put down continuously. I want to make sure everybody understands that I see Claude for that. It's the solutions that I have a problem with, and we'll talk about that in a second. Yvette, you want to chime in?
Well, no. I agree with the caller, but I really want, we'll talk about Claude in a second.
Yeah, caller, finish your point then.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, as far as Claude Anderson, Boyce Watkins, all those people, I want to harken back to something Alexander said on Yvette's show. He was talking about celebrities and they could be doing more. I appreciate anybody who wants to help Black people, Native Black people, move forward. But I think we're at a point where even your best intentions, if they're not spot on, similar to yourself and Yvette and many others, then you just need to shut up and sit down. Because we're in a period where, like as you guys say, wealth is calcifying. We don't have time for people to saying things without any data being backed up, or we just don't have time for people to be running their mouths without any concrete ideas. And what Boyce says is garbage. I mean, he's completely garbage. And Dr. Claude Anderson, he may be saying things that make sense, but most of it is a negative towards our uplift. So.
Thank you so much, caller. What I want to do now is I want to take like a 30-second break. Then when we come back, we're going to get right into Claude Anderson, Powernomics, and Boyce Watkins. Thank you so much. Dash Radio, Dash Talk, 323-879-4445 after the break to call in. What up, y'all? Welcome back. Thank you so much for using your Friday to have this discussion. This is what we need to do. Let's take this next caller. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from? You got to turn your background down.
Paul calling from Maryland.
1 second. Let me get this set up. There's a little bit of noise in your background, just to make sure that's silent down.
I'm watching the show.
So
okay.
So where we're at right now is we're at a point where we got to address some things, some big elephants in the room. I watched me and Yvette actually watched this recent interview from Boyce and Claude, and I've been following Claude for some time. Let me start off by giving much respect for him bringing this discussion to the forefront in terms of talking about race and wealth. But while I say that in the sense of you also have to take critique. And one of the things that I'm seeing is, first of all, his book came out in 2000, and I believe the other one came out in 94. I'm going to focus on the one from 2000, which is Powernomics. It's 2018. In those 18 years, we had a collapse. In those 18 years, we saw the rise of the billionaire. In those 18 years, we saw Amazon and Facebook. In those 18 years, we saw so many different changes that fundamentally, many of the points that are made, I have to say, are a bit dated. And we need to challenge that so that we get the correct solutions. So often people ask me and Yvette for solutions, but they don't want to use imagination. And the reason they don't want to use imagination because they just want to use a shovel and a wrench. And this ain't a shovel and a wrench problem. This is the kind of problem where you're going to have to really step back, sit down, get Indian style, look at it sideways, look at it front ways, and maybe you might come up with a solution. And that's the kind of situation we're in. And so, like, I look at Claud and I look at Powernomics, and I'm going to start breaking it down. But before I do that, let me let the caller say, what's your take on this whole thing?
Oh, yeah. Well, my thing is, I wanted to talk about Claud Anderson because, first of all, I think that what he's saying and what you're saying are actually, I think that the two of you are actually in agreement on a certain level. The good thing about it is that he actually has actual experience working in politics, working in government, things like that. And I think that we should kind of take a closer look at it. I don't think that it's necessarily about always about bootstrapping and trying to become a mega millionaire. A lot of times it's just trying to make a living.
Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it together then. You on the channel with us. I love it. I mean, the thing is, I want supporters for Claud to call in. I want supporters from Boyce to call in. But I do at the same time want to get real. So I looked at this video, and what he said is on level 1, first floor is economics. Racism has nothing to do in the world to do with who you don't like economics. The reality is this: people hire people who look like them, who talk like them, who come from countries like them. Now, if we live in a world where 870,000 of white families are $12 million or more, meaning they control businesses and industry, who do you think they hire to manage their money? To be their private practice doctor? To be the lawyer that files their trademarks? They're
going to hire their own.
And I think that, what does that mean? Hold up. If we only got 380,000 black families worth more than $1 million. And I think that what's presumed inside of this whole math is that we have a unlocked millionaire class in a place called Africa land. Because I'm going to pull it up if I do the images. Claud was brought up something called Africa land in Detroit and tried to put that together. None of this stuff is real in a Bezos America. And that's part of my thing is we're not in the America that he grew up in. We're in the America that I'm becoming an adult in, that I'm trying to raise a family in, that you're trying to raise a family in. And we need to, I understand we need to come together, but we also need to say what's wrong so we can get to what's right. Yvette, you want to say something on this?
Well, here's the thing, and because people have requested it, I'm going to do the Dr. Claud Anderson show on Monday. But let me just say, I think Dr. Anderson, I think he gets a lot of stuff right, and I think he gets a lot of stuff wrong, and that's not slamming him. Like, listen, when he says that this is a systemic problem that enriched a bunch of white people, he's right. When he talks about immigration and how immigration has disadvantaged Native black people, he's right. When these are things, when he says it's the police's job to put, to protect property and protect the wealthy, he's right. I'm not saying that he's wrong on everything, but understand something. He's giving us a solution that is like, I don't even know. Like it's a solution way back when. This is what I say when I talk about that mom and pop stuff. He's giving us a solution that says, well, you don't have to be, you shouldn't work for government. You shouldn't work for corporations. Well, that Africa land thing that he tried to do in 2004 that he got paid, according to what I read, $100,000 for, was through government. It was like when Kwame Kilpatrick was mayor then, right? So you're going through government. You have worked for government. As far as I know, you've never run a successful business. Now, you can say, well, Yvette, you never run a successful business either. I'm not talking about business. I'm talking about economics, and I'm talking about capital. And so I use the best economists I can find. I use the best writers I can find. I use the best researchers I can find to give myself some knowledge that I'm anchored in. He has to do that work. And I understand that if he's older now, he don't want to do the work. That's fine. But you can't keep anchoring yourself in something that doesn't make sense anymore. Let me just say one other thing. You all remember Gawker went under. He's talking about starting companies. Do you all remember Gawker was a online little gossipy, but they had some really good news stuff sometimes, and a billionaire took them out. Now, the owner of Gawker was a millionaire, and what that billionaire said is that a single-digit millionaire can't even access the courts right now. Now, the courts are your protection. Whether you're an individual or a business, the courts are supposed to be there to protect you. When you don't have the money to access the courts to protect you, how are you going to start and build a business? Because that has to happen because you have water that's supposed to go to you. People aren't supposed to break down your stuff. crime, stealing your intellectual property. That's all stuff that you need the courts to remedy. And what we see now is that we don't have the money to remedy it. So your solution is the problem. I agree with a lot of Dr. Anderson's assessment, but his solutions aren't right.
Now let me say this. He said you build factories. Let me caller. Yeah, hold on one second. I understand that you were gonna say it's not dated, but it came from 2000. He said you build factories and make money, and then you take that money and you use it on the second level. Hold up. I just told you we don't own no land here. But okay, I'm not even gonna deal with that. What I'm seeing right now is that we as a group don't want to accept or understand that we were locked out purposefully. And that the color of law said they didn't want to even let us have houses. Hold up. They didn't let us have houses, and now we talking about building factories. We don't play in this paper. In this paper, what we're doing is bringing every piece of data into one document. Dr. Kevin Cosby read it. The president of HBCU said it's the greatest economic summary he's read for black folks. I think it's one of the best papers I've read in the last 20 years in terms of summarizing things. What we found, hold up, 90% of black businesses don't have an employee. 98% of female-led black businesses don't have an employee. And if you don't have an employee, you're probably not profitable, meaning you're probably a hobby or a gig more than a business, doing hair, driving Uber, something that's a contract. How can you say you want to jump from that to having a factory in an America where factories are closing? I'll let you speak on that, caller.
Well, I just look at an example that's right in front of all of our faces, and this is when you have Asians or other ethnic groups who set up shop in black communities to take the money out. So I understand that we cannot necessarily compete with Jeff Bezos, but then again, neither can they. Yet we are sustaining those businesses that set up shop in our communities where we don't set up shop in those same communities. So again, it's not necessarily talking about becoming a mega millionaire. We're talking about making a living. We're talking about making a start.
Yeah, and this is the pushback. Do you know how much it is to set up that shop? Not any, because right now you're doing the same thing that Claude did, which is just say start a factory. He didn't say what we're gonna build in the factory. It's just a factory making cogs. You got to give me a specific business. Now, the other problem is, do we want to sell the same product that they sell? If they sell weave at a premium to black women that don't need to be paying for that when they need to save for their children or whatever, do we want to do that same business? These are the questions that we got to ask ourselves when we start talking about factories and businesses.
Do we want to exploit our own people is what you're saying. Do we want to exploit? You have a lot of Asians come here and make buku money because they're exploiting us. Do we want to exploit our own people in the same way to make that kind of money is what you're asking, I think.
Caller, I got to take the next caller. I appreciate you calling in, man. Thank you so much for supporting my channel. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from? So nonetheless, hello, how are you doing? I didn't want to let you go. What's your take on this?
Okay. First of all, thank you, Yvette, so much for speaking out. I'm calling from Cincinnati, Ohio. My name is Denise. 10 years ago, and we're 10 years back at the same situation, one of the properties that Donald Trump first flipped in order to turn a profit on real estate was a project called Huntington Meadows. Well, after he flipped it, you had other real estate investors come in, take the property, go get a high mortgage loan, own the property, rent it out to poor people, and then take the loan and run out. So like $30 million they wound up taking from the property, and they closed the property down, displacing, I would say, about 800 or 900 people. 10 years later, we have a multi-millionaire named Jeff Birding who owns something called FC Soccer Cincinnati. So now they want to build a soccer stadium in the middle of the last low-income housing areas in the city, and it's going to displace over 1,000 black people. And only because he has the money, it's so sick, only because he has, 500, what did they say? It's like $18 million that they were going to invest, and then the city was going to actually kick back another $10 million infrastructure development grant. So really, even though they say they're privately building it, they're using public funds for it. And because the city is already gentrified, like, they're just pushing us and pricing us out of the city.
Let me say this, caller. Let me jump in here and tell you, we don't know. You know, I think the money is a core part of it. But it's not only because he got the money. It's because of who lives there. It's because how those people have been treated. This is where me and Claude come in line. Systemic oppression. It's because we don't count. Color of Law. Make sure you pick up that book if you haven't. What you see is. What'd you say?
I Jeff Burton's father. I mean, Cincinnati is very nepotistic, and most of your Fortune 500 companies are based out of Cincinnati. So Kroger's, for instance, is one of the biggest grocery retailers in the country. Jesse Jackson was just down here last week calling for a boycott of Kroger's because they're leaving all of the black communities with food deserts, saying because we're stealing from the grocery stores. So the thing was, how do you boycott Kroger's?
I'm with you. And what I see is this. When you start looking at Powernomics and the application of what people feel are solutions, I'm not going to give you those because I don't think they're solutions. Actually, I know they're not. You can't say you're going to get a factory and then use the main money, the factory that makes cogs. We haven't even said what it's going to make, what kind of advantage you have from another country. Understand we don't have a home country. There's no specific product, no specific fruit, sugar, or anything that we're going to do that's going to make our factory uniquely different. But like you're going to take that extra money and you're going to buy all the politicians. After Citizens United, go look that case up if you haven't, audience. That's a case that allows billionaires to just basically give unlimited amounts of money to politicians. Then you're going to go to level 3. We just going to, after you've bought all the politicians as black folks, bought them and competed against white dollars, I just told you about earlier, you're going to buy all the police. Then after you buy all the police, you're going to go to level 4, level 2, 3. You're going to use those powers to get your own media. Now, I don't guess. I go out and I try to give y'all the best. I interviewed Byron Allen, who bought the Weather Channel for $300 million. And what did he say? He said, we're locked out. He said, African Americans you can check this out on my channel. I left it there for everybody to see it. He said, African Americans are locked out in a way that no other minority group has ever been locked out. And if we don't wake up, we're going to be outside in the rain. And understand that this is a guy who actually is doing the work, who sued Charter and Comcast and AT&T using laws from slavery. And I think one of the dynamics that I'm seeing is everybody just wants to feel Claude because he reminds them maybe of their family member or somebody that makes sense or makes them feel like they have agency. We're not here for feelings, though. We're here for reality. Caller, I want to take.
Can I say something?
Go. Let me take the next caller, and then I'm gonna let you chime in. Caller, thank you so much for calling in.
Just let me give me 2 seconds.
Okay.
If you think they stealing from Kroger, if you think they're stealing from Kroger's now, wait till them food boxes get here.
Yes. Can I take this next caller? Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
How you doing? This is Eugene. I'm a truck driver. I'm from Atlanta, but I'm in Kentucky right now.
Oh, thank you so much for calling in. Let me come back to Yvette. Yvette, you know what's a trip? When we was in Louisville, didn't they have the soap locked up? They had the soap locked up.
Yeah,
the body wash.
Wash your clothes with you. I ain't never seen that.
Oh my. You know, and then what's funny is in LA we have these areas that are black then white. You don't have that in Pasadena, but you got that on Vermont. Meaning the soap is locked up on Vermont, but it's not locked up in Pasadena. Understand that we're about to see in America where we all living like what we see in Baltimore, where people are shopping at liquor stores for their body wash and their detergent. I don't want to be part of that America. And part of the reason that I'm doing this work, I don't get paid to do this. I'm not at a school or a university. I'm doing this for us so that we can try to push forward to real solutions, so that we can demand more from government. Caller, what's your take on this?
Well, my take on it. Well, thank you for taking my call, and I downloaded your report. I'm gonna get a chance to read it when I take my break. But
let me say one thing, caller. I'm very short on time, so can you make it like quick? Because this is gonna be the last call of the night. My apologies. This is
ain't no problem. I'm surprised I got in. I'll be 2 points. I'll be real quick. I just had one question. One, if our solution is black politics and white people have locked us out, and basically blocked us in every step of the way, while these same white people are going to help us with reparations and, like you said, transformative politics. How can we get these same group of people to help us out if they're blocking us?
Okay. Let me say this first before I get to your point, because I wanted to bring up Boyce for a second with his flashcards and his crypto and his business school. You know, the reality of what we're seeing right now is that financial literacy, that buying and banking black, is all about blaming black folks for their own problem. It just sounds better because it's like, one thing that I don't like is the tone of the overall like dialogue that I hear from Powernomics and from Boyce, because it recognizes that the system is wrong, but it doesn't hold the system at the center of the solution. And part of what we're doing is shifting that design where you look at government first, second, and third. Then we're gonna look at you. And I think when we come to your question, you can't help but look at Lyndon Johnson. With 50 years, look, very easily we still could be in Jim Crow. It wasn't that long ago. It just would have took Dr. King not being as interested, maybe like somebody that you know that graduated from school and said, I'm not worried about politics. It just would have took Lyndon Johnson not becoming president. The reality is we've seen it happen. And we've seen the executive order signed by JFK that led to maybe your mama or your grandmama having a house today. We've seen it happen. The reality is that we haven't seen it in our lifetime. And it's been knocked away. It's been hammered away. The Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act. Yvette, you want to say something on this point?
No, I think no. It's obvious that you're right, but like I said, part of my problem with this too, though, is that I counted. I went to the video that Boyce and Dr. Claud Anderson had, and one of the things that bothered me is that Claud Anderson kept saying black people are the only people who, and black people. And I understand you say that sometimes. But he kept saying it as if somehow we're intellectually deficient in such a way that, like, we just don't understand how to do things and we don't understand how things work. As opposed to, no, we are just the only group that's been designated to be on the bottom for hundreds of years. And that has consequences. And he says that he understands what slavery wrought, but you get the understanding that he doesn't understand the gravity of it.
And then
He doesn't.
And then some of the data just be wrong. Like he keeps saying Asians only hire other Asians. One article that I found, I may pull this up as well, showed that in Africa, you know, the Chinese that come there, they pretty much almost 85% of the time hire local Africans. It's just it's more cost efficient. We find that here in America, you don't know what these Asians that they're hiring, their business setup is, because you got to understand that most African American, actually almost all African DOS speak English and they are citizens. So that means that they're going to demand certain things as workers. Whereas, like, you don't know the dynamic between a Chinese businessman and the Chinese worker that you see. You don't know if they can.
Dr. Anderson went through this whole thing about how they go and they do apprenticeship for a little while and they do this and that's how they got successful. No, they got successful largely. And first of all, saying Asian when it includes everybody from Thai people to Koreans to Japanese to Chinese is silly. But they got successful in large part because our government selected them to be the model minority during the communist fight. And everybody has tried to be the model minority, and they got selected. They got chose, and they got chose as a way of trying to be anti-black. The same thing for Irish Americans. So it's not like they're methodical and they just go around and they be real smart. No, the ones that get to come here are already usually upper class.
Let's use the data again. China, 2% of the country has a college education, and 50% of the ones that come here are college educated. So they're coming from the top 2%. And we're talking about ourselves in contrast to an ethnic group. Understand, they're not a race. That was all constructed after Brown v. Board. They're an ethnic group with a country, with a language, and also with a lot of wealth often. These Chinese, these South Koreans, these Japanese. Let's talk about them specifically. And what blows up a lot of stuff is the Indian group, the Asian Indian, because the whole argument has always been, well, it's about our skin. Well, they got our skin, but they ain't got our problems. And, you know, I just kind of wanted to have this discussion today so that we could voice our opinions. Yvette, you want to tell them where they can find you?
Yeah, Monday I think I'm going to do the Dr. Claud Anderson show. 9:15 Eastern Standard Time or roundabout on my YouTube, Breaking Brown Family, and we'll have this discussion. And I hope people are ready for it.
Let me say to the caller, I appreciate you calling in. You know, I wanted to get to this whole discussion, and the lines were lit. I wanted to be fair, be even, but make sure we got to the point where we uncovered the realities behind why the racial wealth gap is not being seen. Next week, we're going to have Sandy Darity on, and we're going to dig into the report itself. We're going to dig into the 10 myths. Let him talk about them, but you're also going to be able to call in and give your opinion on each myth. And if anybody wants to challenge the report or support the report, call in and give your piece on it. This is our report. This isn't mine's or Sandy's or Dark Hamilton's. Shout out to the Samuel Du Bois Cook Center and the Institute for Policy, the Institute for Community Economic Development for supporting and being the undergirding of this report. I'll see you next week. Tone Talks out. The Duke Samuel Du Bois Cook Center on Social Equity and Insight Center for Community Economic Development bring to you what we get wrong about closing the racial wealth gap. Myth 1. Greater educational attainment or employment rates on the part of blacks will close the racial wealth disparity. We can't outrun this with diplomas. Myth 2. The racial home ownership gap is the driver of the racial wealth gap. We can't expect real estate to be our escape from historical wealth inequality. Myth 3. Banking black and buying black close the racial wealth gap. We can't use black dollars to spend our way out of the racial wealth gap. Myth 4. Black people saving more will close the racial wealth gap. Myth 5. Greater rates of financial literacy will close the racial wealth gap. Myth 6. Entrepreneurship will close the racial wealth gap. Myth 7. Emulating so-called successful minorities will close the racial wealth gap. Myth 8. Improved soft skills will close the racial wealth gap. Myth 9. The growing number of black celebrities prove that the racial wealth gap is closing. Myth 10. Black family disorganization is a cause of the racial wealth gap. None of the mythology that pushes narratives that black Americans are their own worst enemy will close the racial wealth gap. Instead, we need policy that is transformative in imagination, such as racial reparations, baby bonds, or a federal jobs guarantee. Learn more by reading the full report today.